Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. Our guest today is Louis Sachar. He has written a book called Small Steps. It's published by Delacorte Press Books for Young Readers, and that's the biggest underestimation of an introduction I could give you, but thanks for coming by.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
What I really need to say is that you're the Louis Sacker who wrote a book some years ago called Holes. Which book in, I think, 1998, is that correct?
Right.
Won a couple of very important prizes. It was a Newbery Prize winner. That's the top award for a children's book in this country. And it also, at the same time, won a National Book Award. Has anybody else done that? Won those two awards simultaneously?
I really don't know. I don't pay attention to such things.
Okay. Well, we're really very happy that you took time to stop by. Now, Small Steps has a relationship to Holes. Your publisher, in some of the material that they sent out, call it the follow-up book to the #1 New York Times bestseller Holes, which they tell us sold 5 million copies. Would you see it as a follow-up book also?
Right. Well, we had trouble deciding what to call it. It's not a sequel. It's not a companion book. Basically, what it is it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's a story. The main character is Armpit, who was a minor character in Holes. He was one of the boys at Camp Green Lake, and it follows him 2 years later after he's back home in Texas trying to turn his life around.
Now, even though in a sense you're covering familiar somewhat familiar turf here, it still takes the same kind of work, doesn't it, to write it? As you say, at one point you usually wind up doing 5 or 6 drafts.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it took me 2 years to write, and I never plan a story beforehand. I never plot it out and outline it. Basically, because I think any story that I can just make up in my head and make an outline for wouldn't be that interesting or original. What I try to do is just start with something that intrigues me and then let the ideas come and go in lots of different directions while I'm writing. So the first draft of a story goes all over the place, and then I rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, 5 or 6 times until I get it the way, until I find what the story is and then tell it as well as I can.
The other thing that you say about your craft, which seems to me to be a bit different, is that you kind of restrict yourself to writing 2 hours a day.
Right. It's like the title of the book. I take small steps. And part of that is because I want to give it room to find different directions to go to. Sometimes I'll find that I'm really excited about what I'm writing and think I know where I'm going, but after about 2 hours, I start to lose some of the energy and the concentration, so I force myself to stop. But I think I know exactly what I'm going to write the next day, but then I come to it the next day, and suddenly, while I was sleeping or something, a new idea grew out of the mix and suddenly goes off in a whole new direction.
It sounds to me like a very exciting way to do it. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Getting back to the title as it's presented in the book, one of the things that Armpits does, I guess, on the way out of that farm he was on, is that he talks to a counselor. And she said his life would be like walking upstream in a rushing river. So the secret was to take small steps and just keep moving forward. If he tried to take too big a step, the current would knock him off his feet and carry him back downstream. Now, you said that's a good way, or the way you work at your writing, and it seems to me it's kind of a good way to approach life, isn't it?
I think so. I definitely think so. I don't normally write with a message, but I guess if I had a message in this book, that's it. Just keep going forward and take small steps.
Yeah, I want to get back to the message possibilities later on. The book itself, we should get to what the story is because people out there don't know. We're kind of walking around it.
Yeah.
It's about Armpit, a character from the previous novel, Holes, and he tries to take lessons that he learned at Camp Green Lake and use them to turn his life around, one small step at a time. What was he doing at Camp Green Lake, and what is Camp Green Lake?
Well, Camp Green Lake was a camp for kids, for juvenile offenders, and in the book Holes, and what they did there was every day they dug a hole 5 feet deep, 5 feet wide, and for no apparent reason, and supposedly this was supposed to build character.
Oh my!
But actually, it actually wasn't until he left Camp Green Lake that he actually talked to a real counselor who gave him this advice. It wasn't at Camp Green Lake.
We're going to get into more of the plot of Small Steps and a chance to meet some of the main characters when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. Our guest today, Louis Sachar, is the winner of the Newbery Award and a National Book Award for a book called Holes, and we're really here today to talk about his new book called Small Steps. Now, Small Steps follows Armpit as he tries to turn his life around. When we meet him in this book, as I recall, he has a pretty good job. He's working he's digging holes, but it's better.
He's digging trenches this time.
Okay. For a fellow in landscaping.
Right. He's working for a landscape architecture company and installing sprinkler systems, and he's also taking summer school classes to make up for all the schooling he missed while he was at Camp Green Lake. This
all takes place in Austin, Texas. One of the things that happens, and I think it's kind of true to life, is that he can't shake, one of his friends.
Right, X-Ray comes along.
Yeah, and X-Ray is not in the same place that Armpit is.
Yeah, X-Ray's kind of a hustler and a manipulator, and so he tries to talk Armpit into investing all the money he's made so far working in a ticket scalping scheme.
That's very nice.
They scalp tickets for a pop star named Kyra De Leon, who also becomes a major character in the book.
There's a much more positive relationship described in the book between Armpit and a girl of 10, his next-door neighbor named Ginny.
Right. Yeah, Ginny has cerebral palsy, and she's literally learning to take small steps, while Armpit is figuratively learning. She's actually based on someone I know. That the book is dedicated to Laura and Nancy, and Laura is a 10-year-old girl I know with cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy's her mother. And I was just always very impressed by her courage and her the way she just handles her disability.
Yeah, and one of the great scenes in the book, I think, is when Armpit decides to take Ginny to the big concert.
Mm-hmm.
And, some terrible things go on there, but the fact that he does it is, to me, just fantastic. And it really shows that he's coming along.
Yeah, he really cares about Ginny. It's kind of almost like a brother-sister type relationship. But, everyone else looks at Armpit as this big, scary African American with a criminal record,
mm-hmm.
and she just looks up to him and admires him. So she's the first person to give, to make him feel good about himself, and he treats her with as an equal and doesn't see he doesn't pity her for her disability.
Yeah. That raises one of the questions I had about the book, and that is why don't Armpit's parents trust him? I mean, after a while, everyone else seems to be on his side, so to speak. Even Detective Debbie Newberry.
Well, the detective isn't investigating him. She thinks he's a victim of and I don't want to give too much away. But,
yeah, don't.
But he has an older brother who's in prison for getting in trouble with the law, and Armpit has, in the past, was sent to Camp Green Lake for getting in a fight, and so his parents are just very, and their parents both work and don't see him very much. So when they do see him, they're overly concerned about him getting in trouble, and as a result, have kind of this sort of negative image of him in their mind, or portray him that way.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a knee-jerk image. I mean, they're always suspecting him of doing drugs somehow.
Right. Yeah, they make him take random drugs tests and things, and they're just so afraid of what might happen to him that they go too much the other way.
Mm. One of the darker characters, yet wonderfully drawn, is a fellow by the name of Jerome Paisley,
right?
A.K.A. self-styled El Genius.
Right. Yeah, he wants everyone to call him El Genius. He's
sounds like somebody in radio or something.
Yeah. He's Kyra's business manager and agent and stepfather. And no matter how hard she tries to sound sarcastic when she calls him El Genius, he still takes it as a compliment.
I'm sorry, but I liked him. He was beautifully drawn. One of the people that I want to get into a little more deeply is Kyra de Leon, who is described by somewhere as a spoiled teen pop star. I don't think she is. And
is it what kind of pop star?
A spoiled teen pop star.
She's an appealing character, but she definitely has her faults. She definitely is somewhat spoiled in the fact that she lives in hotel rooms and orders room service and doesn't really know.
We'll get into more of that when we return.
Okay.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Louis Sachar is the guest. The book, Small Steps, it's published by Delacorte Press Books for Young Readers. And before we get back to discussing the young pop star, I want to mention for our audience here that the denouement, if you will, of the book takes place in San Francisco at a hotel that sounds strangely like the Hyatt Regency. Do I have that right?
Well, I didn't. It's just a fancy hotel. I did not specifically think of any one particular hotel when I made it up.
I was thinking of the glass elevators that you mentioned, and that's the only. Well, I guess the St. Francis has them too, and there's a part of the plot that takes them through Chinatown and
right, and North Beach.
North Beach, yeah.
Well, I now live in Austin. I used to live in San Francisco, and I miss it. So, so most of the story takes place in Austin, but then they end up in San Francisco.
Let's get back to our young pop star, who I think really is a very sympathetic character, and I don't know why anybody would not like her.
No, I agree. She's very sympathetic and appealing, but she still has her character flaws as well. That she lives in this bubble,
mm-hmm.
And it's kind of she has a sort of a sad life because there's nobody her age. She has no friends. She's just surrounded by manipulating adults who are using her like I mentioned earlier, her stepfather, El Genius, who manages her career and just controls everything she does.
One of the things that I found out when I read the book is that I think that the most likable character, the one that stuck with me the most, is Ginny. She's the most constant of the characters.
What I like most about the book are the characters really all came alive to me when I write. It took me 2 years to write, and during those 2 years, I felt like I was very close to those characters, and I think that's the strength of the book.
So you would so you're into all of the characters, and I just fell in love more with Ginny than the other ones.
Okay.
I can do that, can't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things they said about Holes is that it had a social message or messages, and you kind of mentioned this back in the first segment, and I'm just wondering, does Small Steps have messages? Did you want it to have them? I mean, to me, it's a book that reads wonderfully well. It's
right. Well, I mean, I never start a book thinking I'm teaching a message. I start out a book trying to make an entertaining and thought-provoking story. But part of that thought-provoking process is, books, you do end up coming away with feelings and messages. And so in this, there is the one we talked about of the need to take small steps and keep going forward. Mm-hmm. But it also touches on issues of race and on
prejudice and
the nature of being of a celebrity. The culture of celebrity in the country,
and the kind of people that surround celebrity, or I don't know, maybe they don't surround it. Maybe they're the ones that create it.
Well, in this case, surround and create. Take away her identity.
The thing that gets to me, though, is that all of these, and after one reads the book and thinks a while, you can come up with these, quote, messages that you might find in the book. But what really I find interesting is that you make the quote messages, unquote, so subtle, and they're so integral to the story that they don't get in the way.
Well, right. I mean, I'm not writing the book to teach a message. I'm writing the book to tell a story.
And to entertain. Yeah. That brings me to another thing. On the cover of the book, on the jacket, it says, I think, ages 10 and up. And yet, I think that anybody could read this book and get an awful lot out of it and enjoy it.
Yeah, people are always asking me what age is it for, and I don't think in that terms when I'm writing. I mean, I know from past history that young people read my books, but I write about young people, and I try to see the world as they see it. But I'm writing stories that I like, and just try to make it accessible to people of all ages. But many adults read Holes, and I imagine they'll read Small Steps as well.
I sure hope so, because Small Steps is a worthy successor to your very successful book called Holes. And it is, as I said before, published by the Delacorte Press Books for Young Readers. We've been talking to Louis Sachar, the author of Small Steps. This is Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.